Hi, I'm Jessica Rudnicki with Reynolds & Reynolds. Welcome back to Connected. Today we're talking to Managing Director at 700 Credit, Ken Hill, about how finding new ways to leverage credit pre-screening can lead to an increase in close ratio and customer retention. Let's get connected. Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today. It's so great to have you.
Thank you for having me and the opportunity to speak to your customers.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it, and I'm glad you're here because I would like to talk to you today about credit pre-screening and how introducing it to a customer earlier in the sales process or in the service lane can have a huge impact on dealership profitability. So Ken, can you give us a quick overview of what pre-screening is and how it differs from a pre-qualification?
Sure. The pre-qualification, which is a very fast segment growing in our market today, that is consumer facing. So you are actually asking or presenting the consumer, and they are providing their permission to access their credit file. Soft pull, they're both soft pulls, but with pre-qual, you're asking to access their credit file for pre-qualification. And that's typically digital retailing, lead forms on the website. So it's at the very top of the sales funnel. Pre-screen, I often compare it to the pre-approved credit card offer that everyone gets in the mail. You're actually doing pre-screens without consumers, without their knowledge, I should say, and you're doing a pre-screen on the consumer. And if the consumer qualifies, then you make that consumer an offer. So that's the difference. One, the consumer is aware, the other, the consumer is not. There's also some differences on the back end with the pre-qualification. You get a full credit report. With the pre-screen, at least with our pre-screen solution that's within Extreme, you get an auto summary, FICO score, and an auto summary.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks for giving us an overview and explaining the differences between the two. So there are some obvious uses for pre-screen, right? So especially if you have a walk-in looking for payment options, but what are some other ways that you see dealers using pre-screen today?
Well, one of the key ones is what you mentioned. When a consumer walks in to the store, you can pre-screen them right away, so you know what the credit profile is of the consumer that you're screening. You know their FICO score, so you know the big advantage is that at the top of the sales funnel, wherever that may be in the process, you understand their credit profile, and you can place them in the right car. You have an understanding of the lender, the interest rate that they'll qualify for, so you can start talking payments, affordability right away. So it's much easier to move customers around in vehicles of interest at the top of the sales funnel than it is at the bottom. Other areas, certainly desking. Right, you're going to desk. Maybe it's a little bit further down. You're starting to desk. You don't want to do a hard credit pull yet. You can pre-screen. Service lane is our big growth area, and understanding that the credit profile, that customer in the service lane, some of the other data that's available that really assists in that service lane sale.
Sure. Okay. Good information. So I'm assuming it's pretty essential for dealerships to have this kind of information when putting a deal together. But are there regulations around handling such sensitive data? What sort of compliance requirements are there around running a pre-screen?
Yeah, it's again back to that credit card offer. When you receive that pre-approved credit card offer, you've been pre-screened and passed, and you're made aware through that letter, and that letter is actually called a firm offer of credit, and that's the regulations behind it, the compliance requirements that if you pre-screen a consumer and they pass, you must give them a firm offer of credit. You have the ability to print and deliver. You can email the consumer their firm offer of credit, which looks very similar to those pre-approved offers you get in the mail. Anybody that's not printed or emailed, we have a mail house behind it that will automatically mail that consumer that firm offer of credit.
Good to know. Good to know. I remember when I got my car, and did the pre-screen. I remember seeing it on my credit report
Yes.
as a soft pull. So
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
explaining that. Very valuable. Okay, so now that we kind of have a better understanding of what pre-screening is, the difference between a pre-qualification and kind of the regulations around it, and how it can be used, can you tell us at what point in the sales, or like you mentioned earlier, the service process, a pre-screen can or should be performed?
As soon as you have name and address, that's all that's required to pull a pre-screen. You can perform it. So as soon as maybe you're scanning a driver's license at the start of the sale, or you've logged the customer's information when they walked into your store, they've called into your BDC, you received maybe a lead from an automotive marketplace. As soon as you get name and address, you can pull a pre-screen so that you can start to incorporate that information into your sales offers and your discussions with the customer.
So safe to say the earlier the better, right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
because we call them power conversations. When you want to have power conversations with your customers, and that power conversation means that you know their FICO score, you know their credit spectrum, you know what type of interest rate they're going to qualify for. You're going to know their trade-in. You're going to know their equity on a trade-in, which is some of the information that's returned in terms of how much they owe on their vehicles, what their monthly payment is. So you're going to know their budget, what their interest rate is. So you're going to have all that information when you start to talk to the customer about their monthly budget.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that information dealerships have on existing customers already, right? So earlier you mentioned the service lane, those customers are existing customers. So can you explain a little bit more about how a pre-screen can be completed in the service lane?
Yeah, well, if you're selling vehicles today out of your service lane application, out of Extreme, our statistics show that somewhere between 35 and 40% of customers in your service lane did not purchase the vehicle at your store. So today you don't have a way to sell them, or you can sell them cars, but you're not getting the information up front. You don't know the equity they have. You don't know an estimated payment on a new car. With the pre-screen data, it educates you and expands who you can sell vehicles to out of the service lane. With the pre-screen data, I can get pre-screen. I pre-screen all the customers coming into service who did not purchase the car at the store. And I can get from their auto history, I can get how much they owe on the vehicle. We align the trade line on the pre-screen report, the auto trade line, with the vehicle that's in the store, so you can get the payoff information. And so an equity calculation can be made that's fairly accurate. And you can determine how much equity they have in the vehicle, how much would get applied towards the new vehicle. So it expands who you can sell vehicles to in the service lane. In addition, it gives your sales representative, when they're approaching that customer, information about what their current qualifying rate might be, what their interest rate versus what there is, what their monthly payment might be versus what their monthly payment is today. So it's a very powerful tool in the service lane. And also with Extreme, once you pre-screen that customer, it goes into the database for data mining at a later point. For instance, there's information in the pre-screen about how many months are left, what the term is of that loan. So that can be added to your database mining tools when you're starting to data mine customers that might be coming up on their lease or their loan. That information is added there as well. So it's very powerful information that to help sell vehicles to customers who didn't buy. So they're net new customers. In addition, if they are in the service, if they are your customer already, why not do a credit refresh before you start that sales process?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you mentioned the two tools and how they work together, because like you
Mm-hmm.
said, it's a very powerful combination, having that kind of information on a customer and being able to approach them in the service drive. So thank you for mentioning that. Um,
Sure.
what about out of the CRM? So what are the advantages to running a pre-screen in a CRM?
Well, we say it allows you to work the right deal at the top of the sales funnel, at the top of the sales process, because In a lot of traditional sales cycles, the customer isn't finding out what their payment's going to be until they get in the finance office. And when expectations aren't met or they're misaligned, dealers sometimes you have to compromise on the price to get that payment down where the consumer wants, or maybe you have to try to ask for some more money up front to try and get that customer happy with the payment. And if they're not happy, you're not going to recover. It's too late to get them on a different car. Finance managers, turn into a salesperson. If I have that information at the top of the sales funnel in the CRM, I can align that customer in the right car, change the options, maybe talk to them about pre-owned vehicles. If by having that score, their trade-in, how much they owe on the loan at the top, what their monthly budget, what they're paying today. I could find out that they were paying $400 on an 8% interest rate, but their score has gotten pretty good. You could get them in a 2%. That gives you a lot of leverage up at the top of the sales process that you wouldn't know if you waited to the finance office to pull their credit. So having insight into their score, what type of payment at the top of the sales funnel really gives you. It also helps shorten the sales cycle, and it helps sell more cars because that sales cycle is shorter. The customer's going to have a better experience, and you're going to sell more vehicles.
Yeah, yeah. Good tips. It definitely sounds like there are a ton of, really great benefits to both the dealership and the customer just by doing something as simple as getting that pre-screen in, as soon as you can, as early as you can in the process. Ken, it sounds like if a dealership can use what they've learned today and start putting this advice into action, they're really going to be closing a lot more deals, like you mentioned, and also increasing customer retention. Is that
Absolutely.
safe to assume?
Yeah.
Good. Well, wonderful. That's always good news. And thank you again for being here today. Before we hop off, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
Just that the more and more dealerships are starting to adopt pre-screen and pre-qualification. It's a very sharp growth curve. So the more and more dealers are adopting it. If you're not utilizing pre-screen today, I would suggest you become educated. We offer free trials within Extreme. So anything that we can do to help educate you and help incorporate it into your sales process, we're happy to help.
Good. Well, you've definitely taken that step today, and I think our viewers will come away from this a lot more knowledgeable on the topic and on pre-screening. So thank you for sharing, and thank you again for being here today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Again, thanks for the opportunity.
It's so important to maximize on every opportunity you have in service and sales. Ken shared some great tips with us today on how to do that. Before we hop off, just a quick reminder, you can watch or listen to past and future podcast episodes on YouTube or Apple and Spotify podcasts by searching for the Connected Podcast. Subscribe on these channels to get notified every Wednesday when new episodes are released. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.